Buongiorno, Mondo, and welcome back to 15 with Fosca, the podcast. Are you dreaming about moving to Italy and making a life for yourself? Curious about the path to getting an MBA in Italy and then staying on to build a career? Or perhaps you're hoping to gain insight into the daily reality of a young expat living in Italy today. Well, then stay tuned for my conversation with Scott Cauble about the mobility of talent, Italy's changing work and family spheres, and the challenges and triumphs that accompany global relocation. We also speak about navigating the job market in Italy, the current challenges for young people here, why they're still leaving, and what can be done and needs to be done to ensure that Italy actively fights brain drain and continues to draw young talent and investment from the world over. Of course, we will also be speaking about Scott's journey and how and why he chose this path, and how he turned his dream of building a life for himself in Italy into a reality. So hit that subscribe button if you want to keep hearing stories from Italy, and grazie mille e buon ascolto. So happy to have you here with me today.
Well, the pleasure is all mine. Thank you so much, Fosca, for the invitation, and it's great to see you and be part of your podcast.
I'm just happy that you agreed to come and talk to me about your life. And so I think we should just get right into it. And I want to hear about
Sure.
what you're doing and what you've been up to. We haven't seen each other in a bit. And I know that you are doing lots of interesting stuff up in Padova and still living though in Milan. So why don't you tell me about what your company does and what you're doing right now?
Sure. Yeah. So at New Twin, we help companies achieve success in their electrification strategies. So in a lot of industries like electric vehicles or even industrial applications, efficiency and also power density are big challenges. Everybody seems to want to push more energy in less time and less space, and things get hot. So that's where we can bring high fidelity models, physics models inside very low cost microcontrollers that are already in these systems. So, sort of that embedded intuition that helps things like electric motors or power inverters and other devices work better. So, for me personally, it's a great intellectual mix
Yeah.
because I'm speaking Italian every day and also able to apply my engineering physics background and appreciate those R&D innovations. But it's also fun on the business side to see exploring product market fit and seeing how the VC market is growing in Italy. So yeah, it's been a lot of fun so far.
And actually, I was going to ask you, like, what differences do you find? I mean, you had I mean, you were at a very young age, if I can say, working at, you're at like top positions at really important Silicon Valley companies, right? So how do you see a company like yours, like where you're working and this startup, and it's exciting, and people don't think of high tech when they think of Italy. What kind of differences are you finding on the daily?
Oh, it's a great question. And yeah, well, I wouldn't say I started in super high positions. I worked my
Oh,
way up, starting at Tesla. But I think what is exciting is seeing there's great talent and great technology everywhere. And sure, there's environments like Silicon Valley where there's a lot to choose from, and there's a lot of maybe a financial and funding ecosystem and infrastructure that really helps. But in coming to Italy and getting started in Milan and getting my business degree here at Bocconi, really helped me find and connect with technology transfer funds and venture capital funds, and that eventually landed me here at New Twin. So yeah, in terms of differences, is that well, I think every company and every industry and every geography can be different. But what I find most of all that's exciting is helping build something new and translating a great technology innovations into a company. And I'd say that I made the decision years ago when I moved over to Apple that rather than be expert engineer someday, I wanted to not just help build products and that push what's physically possible with engineering and technology, but moreover build the teams and companies around that. So, and that's what I find so enjoyable about my work at New Twin is that as a chief operating officer, it's sort of you're dabbling in everything, whether that's finance, accounting, HR, legal, office management, client project management, and sales. So it's great variety, and so I'm really grateful to be there.
It sounds like an amazing environment. And I think that for a while, I remember, you and I meeting in Milan and probably also in Florence and having conversations about the difficulties that you were encountering. I think really finding the fit that you seem to have found right now, which seems like a really perfect one for someone like you who is so multifaceted and interdisciplinary. I mean, even just sort of, your whole approach. I think what you even just said about your the way you're working and the exciting environment and helping as this helping create this new thing. So it seems like you finally found something that is giving you that that rush and what you were looking for, right? So talk to me though a little about those challenges. Let's talk about those dark days, just a
Sure.
bit, so that people don't think that it's all just because then we're just selling the same old under the Tuscan sun and Italy, everything's perfect. And I think it is important that you share the fact that there were a couple of times when we talked where you were like, this is not working out the way I
Absolutely.
thought.
Well, yeah, and I think there was definitely some naivete, moving here. Is that my passion for Italy has been around for over 15 years now, and coming to move here, I was very excited, coming and doing my MBA and exploring a new country. Getting through the bureaucracy, was one challenge, but it's approachable. In the end, there's some logic there. But I think one thing I underestimated, and of course the pandemic didn't help, is having that social system and social network of support. Is that any expat, you can't do it alone. I personally moved alone. I don't have a girlfriend or spouse or family that I brought with me. So that's where for me is the pandemic. I found a lot of solidarity, and interacting with neighbors as well as my classmates, of
Yeah.
course, as we finished the MBA. But some challenges I think were navigating the job market for sure, and being realistic on salaries and expectations there. Um, and yeah, I think just being persistent and reaching out and feeling a sense of belonging, whether that's with friends, with neighbors, with colleagues, and keeping in touch with family and friends back home. So yeah, definitely quite a few ups and downs there, but I don't regret a minute of it. I don't regret the the decision to move my life out here. But
Mm.
yeah, I would say yeah, probably I guess an aspect on the work world in general in Italy, if I could comment on that, is um, it is hard for people in their 20s to build a career here. I think compared to the Silicon Valley, where fresh grads, particularly in engineering, have lots of opportunity. You're paid decent salary, often even with stock options, and you're given good responsibility. I think that can be hard to come by. Italy has really strong universities, and there's very talented engineers that I work with every day. But affording a room to rent in Milan is difficult without help from your family, much less, a down payment on a house, in a big city. So I think that's also something I learned about from my classmates at Bocconi that maybe had made the decision to go back to school to make an orthogonal jump in their careers. Is yeah, how can those opportunities change? So and actually, that's really an ethical part, I think, of the company, is that the founders are well aware that they didn't want to start jobs at the total bottom rung, despite
Yeah.
being at the top of their class, and creating jobs and opportunity for really talented, students and graduates and doctorate
Mm.
students here in Italy.
I'm really glad you brought that up. I think it's also a really important key to the culture. And I get a lot of people asking me questions about, moving here. Obviously, everyone would love to live in Italy, even just for a short period of time. But it's hard to explain to, for example, an engineer what kind of salaries we're looking at. And, if that person is coming over with a family, it's super hard. And because you've just like pinned down the reality, and that's why young Italians leave. And so the fact that,
Yeah.
and so we'll talk about that probably as well. But I love the fact that your company is making a real effort to to break that cycle, because
Hmm.
people can't, the Italian family structure has changed. There is an aging population. People are not having children. There's, a
Hmm.
fierce battle going on concerning migration. And these are all things that, then people cannot find housing. Young people cannot find
Hmm.
housing. And so I'm hopeful, though, that this generation, that your generation is going to succeed in breaking this cycle here in Italy, because people are saying, no, we can't do this anymore. We can't survive. And, the world is evolving. Italian society is changing. It might not be as quick as other places, but the world is spinning very quickly. And so I think it's vital that there are companies that are paying attention to this so that the great talent doesn't leave, right?
Yeah, I can't agree more. And in fact, it's also seeing structurally, part of my work is touching the legal aspects and contracts and hiring and sort of just sort of the inclinations or reality is, for actually a positive note on the work world in Italy is that there are collective bargaining agreements that
Yeah,
very much protect workers' rights.
absolutely.
And, I'm grateful for those. And also that there are good social services and support for middle class in Italy, such that when a global pandemic hits, 4 million people aren't laid off immediately like they are in the States.
That's right.
But on the other hand, is you can have a bit of stagnation or sort of like middle or upper management that never leaves, and so there's not as much
Oh, yeah.
opportunity for a new generation to move in. So that's what's really exciting to see. Post COVID also is, apart from inflation, is also some realization on the mobility of work and digital nomads and the mobility of talent. We have in our company collaborators and employees that have come from the EU and internationally, and so seeing that come together makes us also consider compensation and smart working and things that we take for granted even for quite some time in Silicon
Yeah.
Valley, but
Yeah.
can be very foreign concepts here in Italy, and even with neighbors, in Milan, where you have a family of four living in a small, bilocale or trilocale,
Right.
and they're ripping their hair out about, my 3-year-old and my 6-year-old are at home, and I just need like 10 minutes to leave the house and get a cup of coffee.
Exactly.
Um, yeah, it was pretty funny during the pandemic, but yeah,
So let's
we got
let's
through it.
we got through it. We did. And I think just very briefly, because you and I really should be, I think you should become like a permanent guest, because we could talk about, because I love the fact that we've already, we're a few minutes into it and we've already touched on all these things that of course are not even remotely close to the questions that I had sent you in advance. So I'm pretty happy about that. But no, I want to go back to something you said about the collective bargain agreements, because I think that's really important. And I think
Hmm.
that might partially explain, no, I mean, I'm sure it explains why like Italy has bounced back pretty well comparatively.
Hmm.
I don't know, like this summer, there was some like, I mean, the tourism, the boom that
Hmm.
is actually continuing. I'm sure it's the same in Milan and in Padova. I have never, at the end of September, I don't know, I'm sure there are precedents. Maybe we just notice it more now, but it's also maybe because it's still hot. The air is kind of sultry. It still feels like summer, at least here in Florence. But
Hmm.
man, I saw some lines, like crazy lines, and I'm like, wait, don't people have to go back to school and reality? But I did want to talk about the fact that because people did not, didn't lose their positions. So even if,
Hmm.
they were, obviously, let's say, they had pay decreases or what have you, they didn't lose that job. And so they were able, so Italy didn't lose, for example, hotel employees forever or something like that, even just
Right.
specifically of the tourism industry. And so I think just seeing sort of what's been happening in Italy and how the period of tourism has now, it's sort of like, I just literally read an article today about the fact that beach towns like Forte dei Marmi, so like really nice beach,
Hmm.
like super fancy, have decided to officially extend the season through November,
Wow.
like November 2nd or something, which is, it's a nice capitalistic response to global warming, but that's another thing. But we'll talk about that another time. I wanted to go back, not to the pandemic, because I really don't want to
Hmm.
go back there, but I do
Sure.
want to talk about um, the decision to go to Bocconi, and I want to talk a little bit about that. I know you were there during the pandemic, but I know that it was also a great time of community, of growth, of amazing networking and connecting for you with people from all over the world. So for people out there who are listening who might not know about Bocconi and their MBA program, among other things, do you want to just talk a little bit about, for example, why you decided to choose Bocconi over, I'm sure you got into other business schools in the US and all over the world, probably. Why Bocconi? Tell us a little bit about Bocconi, and then tell me a little bit about those connections, sort of the gift that keeps on giving after now that you've, moved on and out into the, Italian business world.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, for me is that Bocconi and coming to the to Milan and Sta Bocconi, it really has been known for decades and in Italy is very respected as an economics and finance university. So there's Bocconi University, and then there's Scuola di Direzione Aziendale, the business school, Sta. And in fact, the business school has moved up significantly in international rankings in the last few years. So, and in the graduate school, it's the business itself is that apart from the full-time MBA, the business schools offers a variety of early master's programs, like in marketing or healthcare management, but also quite a bit of executive education, which is great because that maintains a very strong bond with major companies in Italy and also multinational companies. And particularly since the Expo event in Milan in 2015, that really put Milan even more on the map as a business and financial center. So for me, the MBA really gave me a solid basis and a variety of business and management aspects to round out my prior, professional experience and technical background. But personally, it really helped establish a network and sense of belonging here in Milan, and also professional associations, keeping in touch with my classmates, who several of whom had stayed in the area or have gone into Europe or back home. But the decision for me is, I remember coming to visit in March of 2019, and I had other acceptances from other European business schools in particular that I was excited. I wanted to get to Italy. That was sort of the goal. And, I remember arriving in Milan and it just felt right, is meeting other students, talking with faculty, seeing the city. Right. And so, there was actually a moment when I was in Campari non Galleria, which is a historic bar, sipping my first Campari stouts, listening to Frank Sinatra playing. And I'm like, this could work, and it was like the one perfect spring weather in March. And then I since learned that, this, like many places in the world, there are 4 seasons. So, that adjusted my wardrobe when I did move here. But in all seriousness, though, it felt right. It was also a way for me to build a network and, professionally, and also feel at home here in my neighborhood, of meeting restaurant owners and shopkeepers, and having very walkable cities is very special. But so it's a good mix, I think, professionally, personally, and also academically for me.
Yeah. And I think it is, for a lot of it, it's one of my favorite cities in Italy, and I've seen it really make this leap. It was slow going up until they finally made the huge leap with the Expo. And now it's just, I think it's the 3rd most visited city in Italy. And it's really high up there. And I think in terms of like global business, it ranks like, it's so high up there on everybody's list. But people have often used to like when people, I don't know, some people think of Milan and they still think of sort of an ugly gray industrial city and not very Italian. And, and I just think I love Milan. I think it's one of the most interesting, exciting, just, it gives me everything that Florence doesn't give me. I don't know, just nothing wrong with Florence, but Florence is just kind of a small town. And so you can do everything and have everything, but Milan is it's like having New York. And it always feels, I don't know, it's always exciting for me. So would you ever, so you live in Milan, but you work in Padova. So obviously things are possible. Italy has an amazing train system. It's not such a great distance. And I'm sure you're doing some remote working. So
right.
but would you ever leave Milan? I mean, not necessarily for Padova, which I mean, I love, but it's just they're not comparable cities. I mean,
Mhm.
Padova is a university town. Milan is also a university town, but Milan is a lot of things. Padova
Sure.
primarily a place for university religious pilgrimages and fans of Giotto. So, but a lot of people might not know that, that's, the Veneto has a lot of big business and big industry. So,
Yes.
um, getting to my point, would you ever leave Milan? And if you did, where in Italy would you, where else could you live? Besides
Sure.
Milan?
Well, I think for right now, at this point in my life and my career, is that, Milan makes sense
Yeah.
because again, if there's any place in the world today where I call home, it's Milan.
Okay.
And, from my studies and getting through the pandemic and, having that importance of friendship and even familiarity has really helped. But, I don't know, as I'm quite open to it, also in, smaller, medium-sized towns in Italy, you live quite well.
Oh, yeah.
Is the quality of life is really good in Italy and particularly northern Italy.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think I would be open maybe to moving sometime in the future. But yeah, for now is that it just checks so many boxes and also thinking of Stanford. Also, apart from the Stanford and Florence campus, there's also an alumni group here in
Very
Milan that's quite
strong.
active.
Very strong.
And
Yeah.
I was elected to the board, so
Oh,
we joke that
yay.
I'm very good at pouring wine at the events. But no, with Stefano Sidienti and several others, it's a really approachable and humble group of professionals that many of whom finished their MBA at Stanford in the 90s,
Yeah.
late 90s, which means they're at the peak of their careers now.
Yeah.
And just the contact with other professional associations and events. Just a week or two ago, we had a Stanford professor from the Biz School that was here
Nice.
visiting and spoke with us all. So yeah, I think it's definitely a possibility in the future. But yeah, Milan for now is I'm grateful to be here.
No, I think it's also a good place. I mean, you're young, you're single. I mean, that's where the action is. It's where you should be. It's funny because I talk to families who are thinking about relocating to Italy. And, for families, nothing against Milan, but sort of to go back to what you were saying, first of all, it's really hard to find housing. And second of all,
Yes.
it's incredibly expensive. It's probably one of, I think it's the most expensive, per square meter, whatever rents in Italy. So I always
Hmm.
recommend, especially to families who want to relocate to Italy, in terms of where, I always suggest those small provincial towns where the quality of life is amazing. The
Yes.
cost of living is lower. There are now international schools popping up everywhere here in Italy, like
Hmm.
just everywhere, from Como to Siena. I mean, just, so you can see that there's definitely something pushing that in, which brings me to sort of my next question. Since you're
Hmm.
sort of a seasoned, well, ormai sei italiano, okay? So you really are probably feeling a little more Italian these days. And we'll talk about that in a second, because I know that, well, we both
Hmm.
recently came back from the States. But um, what do you think, how do you explain this interest in relocating to Italy? I mean, you've lived here for a
Hmm.
long time. I'm sure you've seen a change, because I've seen it.
Sure.
There's this renewed interest. I mean, I can even imagine, I haven't looked at Bocconi's numbers, but I'm sure those are getting bigger. I'm sure, I mean, there seems to be a lot of interest in Italy, but not in Italy just for the short term.
Hmm.
I'm hearing a lot of, younger people who I recently just met with, women from all over the world. I'm also part of a sort of a women's international networking association here in Florence. And I'm now active with them. This is sort of the importance of networking, just going back to the Stanford Alumni Club in Milan, but just it is important, even more important in Italy, I think, than,
Hmm.
I mean, it's important everywhere, but in Italy, it's very much valued. The time
Hmm.
you spend with people socially, around shared interests, and even if you are in a work environment, it is important to sort of keep those connections alive. But beyond that,
Mhm.
getting to my question. So, as someone who really knows Italy, are you seeing the same things I'm seeing? Are you seeing this influx? Are you seeing people wanting to come? Are people asking you, hey, Scott, curious to know about your path?
Yeah, well, absolutely. And also even friends I've met that were expats from not the US, but even other countries that would
Yeah.
reach out either at LinkedIn or other channels to see what is it like living here, or should I do an MBA or look for a job immediately? What does that look like? And so I think there is a lot of interest in coming to Italy beyond the, stereotypical aspects of,
Yeah.
certainly Italy is romanticized, but it is much more than that. It's one of the top global economies, and also looking at the investment perspective, is it's also proof is in the numbers. Is of course Silicon Valley is still at the top in terms of amount of investment and just the ecosystem there. There's many studies on how that came to be.
Right.
But in terms of London, Berlin, Paris, and other cities in Europe, is Milan and Italy are seeing a lot more investment, and that's not
Hmm.
uh, always an issue of money, that makes these investments happen or successful, but it's also the ecosystem around it. So,
Yeah.
and that's where, internet, we have now not one, but two international investors that recently we closed our Series A round in May. And it's very interesting seeing this ecosystem coming to life that really wasn't around
Hmm.
10 or 15 years ago.
Yeah.
So I think also from a straight, infrastructure of investment
Yeah.
and finance is also an indicator too that people believe in Italy, and also private equity and other
Wonderful.
interests there. So, but as you said, areas regions like Veneto or
Very good.
Brianza, that
Right.
have that. There's a fabric of small and medium sized businesses and family owned businesses,
Yeah.
but nonetheless, there's also a lot of growth and interest from international
Hmm.
sources too.
And it's interesting to see it from that perspective because you do see it. I mean, I see it, for example, as just sort of like an average Joe. I see it, in terms of I look at the kind of things that are opening in Florence, or, I talk to people
Mhm.
who are business owners and who tell me how Florence is different today compared to 5 or 10 years ago. So, of course, I'm imagining something going on in Milan, but this makes me happy because I think that. Um, Foreign investors often fear Italy because of all its bureaucracy and it's how complicated things are here. I hope that maybe this there are a lot of people who work very hard at cultivating those relationships. A lot of politicians, like I'm thinking of Nardella, our mayor, Florence's mayor, he's very good at bringing in foreign money. And I hope that now there is a generational shift going on. So I'm sure the average age at your company is probably what? Do you know it off the top of your head?
At most 30,
Yeah.
probably.
Yeah.
I'm probably one of
And
the older ones. Yeah.
and that's the way it should be, you know? I mean, in other words, if change is going to happen, this is the only way it's going to happen. I mean, we need to have people who are max 30. I mean, I'm joking, obviously, but you know what I
Mhm.
mean. There is a generational shift going on as well. And it seems to be
Mhm.
colliding with an increased interest in Italy on a number of levels. And I'm really glad you brought up the sort of the more economic financial one, because my brain doesn't work that way. And I love that as an indicator because it's concrete and we have data and we
Mhm.
can go and look at those numbers, which I am going to go look at because I think they are interesting to contemplate. Like, what does foreign investment look like in Italy today? So I'm glad you brought that up. Um,
Yeah.
it's an interesting thing. And I think, I mentioned I was at this event the other night with this really interesting group of very international women, many of them who had decided to open up their businesses in Florence. People from
Mm.
the world over. I mean, I met people from, Australia, India, Singapore, the United States, the UK. So just very interesting, though, to see what I think is really a changing landscape, but also like a very exciting moment to be here. I mean, I feel
Yeah.
a really nice energy, and I'm glad that you're confirming that you're seeing it as well from sort of from the business side.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. Well, even I was at an event about 2 weeks ago at Festival Marda. There was a group of young entrepreneurs and seeing the mix of everything from real estate to banking to industry and family businesses is seeing all over
Yeah.
in Milan, that there is a strong community here, and how stimulating that mix can be, particularly among a younger generation of entrepreneurs and managers. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So I want to get back because we are actually coming to the end of our time together. But this is just the
Mhm.
first, what I hope will be just one of many conversations that maybe you'll
Certainly.
agree to come back because it's fun talking to you and I feel like I learn a lot. So I want to go back to
Likewise.
that. You're so sweet. I want to go back to the fact that we were both in the States this summer. I was there for a longer period of time. Because for a number of reasons. And you were there, but you were there for a while. And so I wanted to talk a little
Hmm.
bit about, because I always feel like a fish out of water, I always feel when I'm in the States, I feel like, odd woman out. And when I'm here, I feel like I'm still like La Americana, even though I'm, very much on the inside. Because, when I come back, I don't know if this happens to you, but like my, it's not like I forget my Italian. I've been speaking for a long time, but my accent gets stronger when I've been only like primarily speaking in English. And also like
Sure.
Italian doesn't come to me as quickly. Like if I'm playing tennis and I need to curse or something, it's going to come in English,
Right.
So I just want to know how you feel when you go back. I mean, to the States, and then like what are the things you love about going back to the States? What are the things that are hard? What do you miss about Italy, or all that
Yeah.
stuff? How did it feel?
Yeah, for me, going back to the States, is that of course there's places you visit and people you see, and memories that come back. Is that I guess part of adulting or just getting older is that you see that people and places change. So there's a lot of history there that is wonderful to see, and but also seeing, celebrating with friends and family,
Yeah,
those great moments there and reliving those and spending time with them. And it's wonderful that communication, everything is free. Voice over IP. Just yesterday, I'm on the phone with my dad, and it's like I'm right next to him in the
I know,
room.
I know,
Um,
I know.
and it's fantastic. And at the same time, you can't get a hug over,
No,
a
not yet,
FaceTime audio call.
not yet, not
Not
yet.
yet. and
People
and
are
so
working
I
on it.
think yeah. Well, and so I think there's also like getting a good American breakfast, and I was visiting my dad in Arizona, and yeah, it's so cool going in, a diner at 6
I
a.m. and it's like,
know.
you know, not the capucho brioche and all this stuff, that's a different style here. But I will say things that I miss about Italy when I'm in the States. Number one, base food quality. Okay, apart from being picky on cuisine, it's just the base
Yeah,
quality of ingredients, whether it's at the supermarket or any meal. It's like for €8, I get a piatto
I know,
unico, a plate of food of pasta, vegetables, meat,
I know, I know.
very fresh. And so it is shocking the degree of preservatives and like heavy oils and frozen food that you get
Yeah,
everywhere in the States. So I struggle with that actually when I'm back there, because you're just kind of putting on the calories and the pounds. Anyway, that's one aspect, and I'm sort of a foodie, so my colleagues even joke with me about that. But
yeah. Well,
time
but
around
I
the
feel
table
your
with
pain.
family and friends.
Yeah,
Yeah. Well, and the big one I think in Italy is time around the table with family and friends, and I think that matters very much, one's family upbringing and everything, or environment, but that's very appreciated here in Italy. As I said before, having your local area and neighborhood, and it's so walkable that mom and pop shops still very much exist. And another aspect is that, I'm not the best dresser, but it's cool to see Italians carry themselves well. It's
I
not just
know.
Milan. It's
It's the
just like
aesthetics. It's
it's
just the
almost not
aesthetics.
fair.
I know. No, but I was writing something to a client just yesterday about Milan, and I said that one of my favorite things to do in Milan is just watch people because everyone is so beautifully dressed. And
Oh
I
yeah.
mean, Milan is sort of the extreme, but Italy, I mean, everywhere, obviously the bar is pretty high, but when I go to Milan, I just stop and stare. Everyone is so
Oh
elegantly
yeah.
turned out. And I think that we've lost that in America. We lost it a long time ago, long time ago. But
Hmm.
I think these are important things to point out, because when I go back to the States, I mean, natural beauty, of course, thank goodness, like the United States is absolutely beautiful. Our cities are fantastic.
Hmm.
The culture, all that. Please don't, I mean, but exactly the same feeling. I mean, sometimes it's just so that, I don't know. I feel like here there's still a lot of emphasis put on human contact. I mean, I say it a lot, but it's
Yes,
still very much a culture where face-to-face interaction is the way to go. Even though Italians love their WhatsApp,
absolutely.
love their voice memo.
Well, yeah. Well, and it's the degree of nonverbal communication, I think, as
Yeah,
well. That's
yeah.
almost stereotypical. I'll say one of the funniest things for me is when an Italian person is angry and they're arguing over the phone. Nevertheless, they still gesticulate, and I think it's wonderful because you just get across so much more. And I was even gesticulated in the car, not to flip someone off, but to communicate something nonverbally, and she didn't know what it meant, and so it was a
Oh,
funny moment also comparing culturally. Yeah. But yeah, it was, but those little things that do make a
yeah.
difference. And even this week, I got back from Padova just yesterday, and this week is also Fashion Week in Milan.
Oh,
So
that's right.
just getting off the
Fun.
train station and walking around, I mean, even you see like um, a significant number of outlier, tall, lanky people, young, model looking people that aren't
Right,
in all their garb yet. But
right.
then people watching, going down in downtown in
Unbelievable.
Brera or these other places, just like, I'm totally being judged right now. But looking around, it's just very, very cool and enriching. Apart, I've never been to any runway sort of show, but just seeing
You
all of
don't
the
even need
events
to
and
go.
restaurants,
Exactly.
and
You just,
yeah,
it's
it's great.
amazing. It's amazing. And it's a beautiful thing to watch. And I think it's something that is so deeply etched, onto Italians or into them or whatever, like this innate sense of, beauty or what have you, that
Hmm.
we just, I mean, it's just a cultural thing. And whether that come out in food or in design or fashion, or just the way you
Hmm.
get dressed to go even to something silly like the supermarket. You never know who you're
Right.
going to run into. And so those are, I think, really important cultural things that help, though, you get through your day. I don't know how to explain it, like seeing
Yeah.
so much beauty. um for me, it helps me. Like when I walk around Florence, it's hot, it's full of people, but everywhere I look is beautiful. Or, I
Yeah.
see really beautifully dressed people, or I don't know, I'm just happy. I walk by a cafe and I smell those smells of an Italian pasticceria,
Hmm.
which, they're hard to replicate, that beautiful mix of,
Yeah.
sweetness and coffee. And also, I think you touched on a really good point, and it's something I talked about with another Stanford alum who was a guest of mine. But like, how no matter what, like, really good food is accessible to everyone. And so we
Yes.
could also talk about that from an economical point of view, even though like the prices are off the charts here compared to what I
Hmm.
saw and what I experienced in the United States this summer. I'm sure you were in the Bay Area. Were you in the Bay Area, or were you only in
Just in Arizona this
just
time,
in
but yeah.
Arizona? Okay. I don't know, but the New York area is off the charts expensive, off the charts.
Mhm.
And so, thinking about what I would be asked to pay for a bottle of Prosecco at a restaurant,
Hmm.
that I know that I buy that bottle on sale for like, and it's good. And I've maybe spent €5, 4 even sometimes.
Right.
If I get a really good deal, I can even get it for like 2 or 3. And it's,
Yeah.
imagine and having to pay like $40 for that, or, not really having a hard time finding a good cup of coffee, and then ending up in
Yeah.
at an Italian style place in New York and spending $45 for breakfast.
Wow.
45, because like 45 for like a panino, a pastry, an Americano, and a cappuccino.
Wow.
Which in
No, it's, I
Italy,
mean,
even if you go to like the night, even if you and I meet up in Milan and we go to the nicest cafe in Milan and we stand up, we don't sit down, but we each have a brioche or a something, a tramezzino, and we have a coffee and a cappuccino, whatever. We're not going to spend more than what? 10, 12 euro
Right. Right.
maximum if we have like really nice sandwiches and really nice pastries. But if you go to any
Yeah.
ordinary cafe. So anyway, I'm getting totally off track. I want to because I love talking to you, but I want to ask you two final questions. So the
Sure.
first is very much related. Um, could you or would you go back to the States to live permanently? And a related
Mm.
question, which we sort of hinted at the beginning, but what's in store for you, Scott? What do you see in your future?
Oh, wow. Both very good, deep questions. I guess, never say never. But my intention in coming here, 4 years ago was to make a permanent move, and I have every intention of continuing to build a life here in Italy. So,
Okay.
of course, there have been many ups and downs, and I've made definitely sacrifices for sure,
Yeah,
economically and also personally. But that there's also things and just part of life that independent of where you are, there's just things that come up.
that's
So,
right.
I guess there's that, I guess sort of a cheesy Star Trek quote is like, you can, what is it? It's possible to commit no mistakes, but and still lose, not to so totally deny the possibility of a picture perfect ending, but it's the sense that you get through things, and sometimes a global pandemic isn't your fault, but how you move forward is definitely part of it. And then the next question is, gosh, what's in store for me is that I think your habits follow you. I was definitely good at being the good student and good employee and everything. And so finding that balance between, my work and my personal life is definitely, something I strive for, whether that's, exercise and friends and hobbies and things outside of work. So I see that. But yeah, building a life here and hopefully, a wife and family someday. And but yeah, it's also I have some family friends that are from Italy, and so going to visit them and seeing several generations of that family
Nice.
and what they've been able to build, and whether it's weddings or Easter, Sunday dinner, Sunday brunch, Easter brunch with them, and it's pretty special. So I think what's refreshing for me and is having that daily reminder here of the reasons why I decided to move here. So yeah, I definitely don't regret my decision. Don't have any intention of moving back to the States anytime
Okay.
soon. So, but yeah, excited to keep moving forward.
Yeah. And I think this is a great way for us to end. But it's just I see only an even brighter future. And I hope that a visit to Florence is in your future. If not,
Absolutely.
I know that a trip to Milan will most certainly be in mine at some point, hopefully in the not too distant future. And so I just want to thank you. You've been a wonderful guest, but you've really been
Oh,
a good friend and interlocutor for me.
oh,
We've always had such fun conversations, and I don't know. I'm happy that Stanford brought us together and that we've stayed connected, and that Italy impacted you so much that it it determined the course of your life as it did mine.
absolutely.
Maybe that explains our connection. I don't know. Maybe,
Yeah.
but
Well,
I
absolutely. And thank you likewise. And Fosca, it's so wonderful keeping in touch with you and the friend that you are. And
thank you.
absolutely is at my time in 2010 there, I remember arriving in Florence that day and seeing the facade of the cathedral there and spending wonderful moments, with my host family, with classmates
Yeah.
and with you all there at the program. So it's definitely, changed the course of my life. So
Well,
thank
I'm
you.
so glad it did. I'm really glad. So thank you so much for today. Grazie mille.
Grazie a
Grazie a
te.
tutti. Arrivederci alla prossima. Thank you again, Scott, and thanks to all of you for tuning in to 15 with Fosca. Check out the podcast description for Scott's bio and some links related to our conversation today. Grazie mille e arrivederci e alla prossima settimana.